Today I'm at the bench tying one of my favorite all-time jigs for ice fishing. Stay tuned. So welcome back. Back at the desk, and keeping with that theme for ice fishing, I was going through my box, a small box that I keep in the chest pocket of my ice suit, just looking to see if there's anything that I needed to switch out. Sometimes by the end of the season, sometimes that box gets a little full, but I found in there my favorite all-time jig to use ice fishing. And it's particularly when we're catching panfish or the bite's just slow and I'm trying to get something. There are lakes and times that we do target larger fish. I'm primarily fishing walleye, which I wouldn't use this jig, but this jig is perfect for perch, crappie, bluegill, sunfish, any of those panfish. That's middle of the day when the bite is real slow. This is a jig that I always go to. The sample that I have is years old. It is beat up. It is ugly, and I still keep it and use it regardless of how poor it looks. So let's switch over just briefly, and this is what I'm talking about. This is just a simple, it's a straight shanked hook. It's a number 8. It's a 320B mustad hook. And this is an ant. So I'm not sure where I got this particular jig. I've had it in my box for years and years. As you can see, the paint is worn off. That top body section on one side, the hackle is all beat up and hideous. So that hackle is pretty rough looking. It's deformed, it's lopsided. It's been sitting in my box for all summer long. It's an odd color. It's kind of discolored, either from being mixed in with rubber tails, or cheaper jigs with cheaper paint and kind of wore off. But I've caught hundreds of fish on this jig, and I just love using it. It seems to work every single time. So there's a couple things that I wanted to do today. Show you how I cast some of these jigs. Now, I don't have a mold. There are molds that I have seen pictures of that are either silicone or vulcanized rubber, very similar to the molds that you would take the same hook that we're going to use today, lay it across a blade, and then just solder it in place. So it's not a two-piece mold. It's just a rubber disc that will have an area to lay the hook, and it holds the hook in place. I've searched for years trying to find those molds, something for sale, new, used, but have never been successful. So I've never been able to find those for sale. I did make my own one year. It's made out of wood. We're going to see it in one of the examples that we use here today. But there's a couple different ways to go about making this jig, and we're gonna go through the 2 or 3 ways that I've done it that work very well. I encourage anybody who's interested in using and tying this type of jig, tie it in one of the examples that we use here today, whichever you are most comfortable with. They all work perfectly. So the first talking about the handmade cast bodies, here's a couple examples of the bodies that I cast using solder. And like I said, I have a wooden jig to just place that solder onto the hook, and then we can paint them. And this is the jig that I built. Originally I was going to have 8 stations, so there would be 8 of these dowels inserted into the circle disc, so I could place 8 hooks into it. Do 8 at a time, and solder one, turn it, solder one, turn it. But this worked pretty well. It was very simple. All I did was use a hacksaw blade just to cut a slot in the dowel, which allowed a place for the hook to be placed. And then there's 2 shallow holes that I just used 2 different size drill bits. Picking drill bits that would make the ant body shape that would match the hook that I'm using. So like I said, this is a Mustad 320B. Size 8 hook is the one I like the most, but 6, 8, or 10, either of those hooks, whichever size you would prefer. And on this other side, without a dowel, you can see that I've also made hooks, or made the ant body. So there's a hole in the side of the disc, so the hook can face down. And this works as well, trying to match the sample that I have, because the side facing the hook point is a flat profile, and it's the back that's rounded. So soldering this way creates that flatter profile on the hook point side of the hook shank. Both ways worked well. Very simple. I have always used this old soldering iron. It's nothing fancy. I've had this, I think, since the 80s, and it was old that I gathered from somebody's toolbox. I don't know if I borrowed it or acquired it or garage saled it, but it was used when I got it. It still works. It's not a terrible soldering iron, though I did go out and spent $20 for something that was made in this century. So soldering irons, they are not expensive. You can spend a fair amount of money on one, but we're not building computers here. So if you don't have a soldering iron, just get yourself a cheap one. $20 will do what we're doing here. So another way to get that ant body, if you don't want to solder, here's an example of split shot. And there's thread on this, not to tie the split shot in. Basically, I just found the split shot of a size that would work and be proportional to the hook shank itself, and just press them on. And I just use flat jawed pliers. These are just small hobby pliers. Pressed them into place, and then I just took my 2/0 thread, started locking the thread on towards the point of the hook, and then just wrapping it up the shank of the hook, so these won't slide. You could glue them in place. I just don't typically keep super glue on my desk, so I use thread. It works perfectly. Now this is just getting, what we're talking about at this point in the discussion is just getting the proportion, just getting that base weight attached to the hook. So I'm placing a hook in the vise, and I'm going to add a little bit of weight using the lead strip. To do this, very simply, we lock our thread on in the center of the hook shank, and with touching wraps, wrap the thread up towards the point of the hook. I can take the lead strip and just pinch it over the hook shank so it kind of bends itself around the hook shank itself, and we can lock that on with thread. Just twist it a little. I want it to stay on top of the hook shank as I walk the thread back up to the eye, and then a couple wraps back onto itself towards the point of the hook. And then I'm going to just fold this flat onto itself, and again just pressing it on both sides to wrap it around the hook shank. If I tried to wrap this like chenille, it would just break. This is very, very thin, paper thin lead sheet. So there, I lock it on in place, and then I can wrap my thread back down with open wraps towards the point of the hook. And this last piece you can either pull off or just pinch back on itself. And we just cover it with a few wraps to lock it into place. Now, adding the weight in this way, it's a uniform size, but the weight is there. You're going to build your bulk using your dubbing material, and that's what's going to create the shape of the ant. I'm not sure if we can really see how well we can see, but there is a strip of lead similar to this that is just on this hook shank to add some weight. You can use the old matchbook style lead weight strips. That works perfectly if you can find them at all. I have this old roll of lead. Just take a regular pair of household scissors and you can cut yourself some strips like so to tie into the hook. Also to weight this, which works very, very well, and this is just lead wire that you'd buy at a fly shop. This is 0.020 size, the diameter, which seems to be a general all-around good thickness of lead wire. If you want it a little bit thicker, you add a couple layers. If you want a little bit thinner, you just use one layer. Works just fine, and is probably the easiest out of all of them just to quickly put on the hook shank. As you can see in this example, this is using dubbing, which makes a very nice body, but you have that lead underneath to give it some weight. And then lastly, which works well, though the profile, it's not 100%. These jigs work well, but I don't know, there's something with this jig with a flat side and the round top, and I don't know where I got this. It's been in my ice fishing gear forever, so I'm not even sure. I could have borrowed this from somebody and never gave it back. So, but here's some pre-made bodies that you can buy. Probably Barlow's, I think, is where I got this jig. I did switch my vise today. I have the camera set up at this table, so I just brought my vise over from my fly table. It's just a little bit easier. This is another small jig. These ant bodies are 1/32 and 1/64. The 1/64 probably is what I prefer, this body here. But the 1/32 is also nice if the fish are a little bit bigger, if they want that little bit larger profile. So to begin with, and just to show you how I'm tying these, first, this is the pre-made body they got from Barlow's. I'm sure they have them at Jan's, Hagen's, any of the suppliers of lure materials, jig bodies, unpainted jig heads. So I get these unpainted. Very simply, all I'm going to do is lock on my 2/0 thread in the center of the body here. And in my example, I'm using ginger hackle. We've talked about the hackle in other ice fishing videos. This does not have to be expensive, fancy hackle. This is just generic Chinese necks. The smaller feathers on the saddle hackle. The fibers on this will extend roughly twice the length of the gap from the shank to the point of the hook, at least that length past the point of the hook. I don't like them too whispery, I don't want to make them terribly long, though you can use longer fibers and make it really spidery looking. And just lock this into place with a few wraps. Use your hackle pliers. I'm just going to wrap this with 3 wraps. The first 2 in between the vise and my bobbin, and the last wrap I come around to the outside of the bobbin, so when I change hands I pick up my bobbin and lock that into place. And as you can see, the hackle pliers slid off, but it's secure in place and did not move. Finish this with your whip finish tool. Like I said, this is terribly simple. Let's do this properly. 1, 2. There is nothing to this jig. So I've tied up a few of these white bodies, black bodies, this yellow color. Not sure what it is with this yellow color. It just seems to do well. So the next way we can do this, as I mentioned, is the lead weight attached to the shank of the hook and then using a dubbing. So we will just use the lead wire. So first we begin by locking on our 2/0 thread, and this is just a plain cheap nylon. You don't have to use your good fly tying thread for this. And then you get a length of your, in this case we're going to use the lead wire. And I just get a length that's manageable. You can use a lead-free wire. I've had this spool for quite some time. I don't use it all that often. But lock your lead in place. I walk the thread back towards the center of the hook shank. In this bottom body section is wider than the top, so I wrap it back onto itself. And then you can take the thread and just wrap it over your lead. It locks it into place. And then you walk it back up where you want to put your next piece of lead. And lock it into place up at the top. And this is going to be a little bit smaller of a section, so just a single layer usually works. I haven't weighed these specifically, but doing it in this manner is roughly a 1/64. You can increase the weight by not snipping the lead and just wrapping a layer towards that center section of the body. And that thread's going to keep everything in place. I walk the thread back down just past the point of the hook. There's a little bit of thread that will show out the bottom here. So to keep that yellow color in mind, what I have here is an Orvis, the Bunny Bright dubbing that I've talked about before. This is number 70 yellow is the name of this, and it's an off yellow color that has some tinsel mixed in, a golden tinsel. So it's a very nice color, and I just snip the corner of my bag so I can pull out what I need, like so. Before we begin dubbing, I just have some tacky dubbing wax here. Run some along my thread. Grab a pinch of dubbing. Now this is probably more than what we need, which is fine. Just remove any extra. Retwist your dubbing just to finish it off. Add a couple wraps just to secure that and create a little bit of a base for our hackle. In this hackle, as you mentioned, is ginger color, and it's nothing terribly fancy. This is from Tacklecraft, and it's just a streamer neck. And as you can see, we're taking most of the feathers from the bottom portion of this neck, the smaller feathers. So we're taking these feathers here, and I use the larger feathers for streamer wings, for larger jigs, for the hackle for larger jigs. But these are by no means expensive, fancy necks. So I trim the fibers like so, just to give the thread a place to tie on. You can lock this into place. A couple wraps towards the bend of the hook, a couple wraps towards the eye of the hook. Go back to our hackle pliers. And again, 3 wraps. 2 between the vise and the bobbin, and our 3rd wrap on the outside of the bobbin, so when I switch hands, everything is locked into place. Now there are a couple fibers trapped forward. That's going to be hidden by the next body section of dubbing. Again, we go back to that Bunny Bright dubbing, the number 70 yellow. And you just make this body section a little bit smaller in diameter. Finish this off with a neat head of thread. There's a section of that dubbing that we're going to remove. So once everything's nice and neat, finish this off with your whip finish tool. 1, 2, 3. You can leave some of these fibers sticking out. It's just this last piece, the tail of that dubbing noodle, is what I'm kind of snipping away. Finish this off with your head cement of your choice. Just a dab or two on the top, and I usually put a drop or two right in the middle of the body. That is a nice jig. I enjoy fishing, ice fishing with this ant body. Very simple fly. Now, other ways to tie this ant fly on a perch rig, maybe a little bit higher up the line from a heavier jig or a weight. You could tie the body with just the dubbing only. using a dubbing material that floats, like the goat. I have different dubbings. I guess I didn't show the dubbings earlier, but this is a goat, Angora goat, which floats. It's a very nice, natural looking fiber. On a weighted jig, the floating property isn't necessary, but you could tie this jig, or you could tie this fly without the weight, so it does float, it does suspend in the water. Again, we talked about here's super fine waterproof dubbing. I enjoy using this, just tying my terrestrials, so ants, flying ants, and I like using this dubbing also for just regular Catskill style dry flies, the bodies. And of course we've talked about the larva lace. The larva lace also has the nice yellow. This is a brighter yellow. This is more of an orange. But those are two great colors. There's also, I wish they put the name of these. This is more of a gold, but some really neat colors. So kind of a off the cuff video that we did here today. I was just goofing around, and yeah, I was actually bored this morning. So a buddy of mine was telling me how up in Canada guys are already ice fishing, far north, but still they're ice fishing, and it's November. If you enjoy what we did here today, go ahead, add some comments down below. Please include any questions. I kind of glossed over a lot of this. As always, like and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Keep tying, and until next time, guys, tight lines.